get us started. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. We're going to have a big group tonight. We had almost 200 people that signed up for this, so it's very exciting. We're also going to be recording this so that folks can see it afterwards, or if there's a piece that you missed or want to remind yourself about, you'll be able to do that. Or if you want to share it with friends or family, that is also possible. So welcome. My name is Carol Oldham. I'm the Executive Director of the Massachusetts Climate Action Network. And I have been working with a couple folks pretty intensively to put this together for you guys. So I'll go ahead and introduce my fellow team members for this local energy campaign. And we've got Joel Wool from the Clean Water Action. Joel, are you there?
I am, yes.
Ta-da, there's Joel. And then we've also got Ben Hellerstein, who's from Environment Massachusetts. Ben, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Fabulous. All right. So the three of us are going to be giving you guys the presentation tonight. And basically what we'll do is we will go through the slideshow with you guys and sort of explain stuff for you. And then at the end, we'll have questions and answers. So what you can do is if you look on your little toolbar for free conference call, there's a little thing that looks like a speech bubble, and that is the chat. And so you can ask questions in there. I'll keep track of them during the presentation, but I'm going to go ahead and keep you guys muted. And you know, just because otherwise everybody's dog is going to be barking and stuff like that. And so, but then you can ask the questions during the presentation, and we will answer them at the end. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Joel, who can tell you guys about Mass Power Forward and get our slideshow starting.
Thanks so much, Carol, and welcome everyone. Again, this is Joel Wool from Clean Water Action, and we're so thankful to MCAN for hosting and helping facilitate this webinar. The three organizations, Mass Climate Action Network, Clean Water Action, and Environment Mass, are all part of a statewide coalition called Mass Power Forward. And I see from the attendee list that a number of you who have signed on are also from different groups that are part of the coalition. For people who may not know, Mass Power Forward is a statewide coalition of over 150 organizations, including environmental, public health, clean energy businesses, faith organizations, and others that I'm not thinking of right now. We are so excited to have a crowd of people signed up, and we'll definitely be sending out the recording along with other resources. What we're really here to talk about today is a new effort to organize local communities to push towards 100% clean, renewable energy, and a simple toolkit using over time in stages for advancing local clean energy initiatives. This first framing of a campaign that we're really going to start digging into next year, although there's been some early previews late this year, I think. And we intend to follow up this brief presentation by sending along or linking you to fact sheets, as well as we schedule it, as we calendar it out, of upcoming trainings where we're going to dive more deeply into specific local initiatives and hopefully drawing on some of your expertise on things you've done in your what we're hoping from this presentation and this toolkit is that community groups will adopt what works, will let us know what isn't working, and above all else, stay in touch, network with other communities and organizations advancing local clean energy efforts. Our coalition, Mass Power Forward, is also going to be engaged in statewide legislative fights. And what we want is for these municipal and community local efforts to build momentum for change that reaches people across Massachusetts and ultimately across the region, across the nation. Carol, could you put us next?
Yes. Give me just a second. Sorry. Okay.
And I see more folks are joining. So if you're just joining, I'm sorry that you joined on this slide because it's not a particularly happy one. But welcome, everyone. This is Joel from Clean Water Action. here with Carol from Mass Climate Action Network and Ben from Environment Massachusetts. So we're going to dive into the local 100% clean energy campaign, but first, just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that it's been a tough couple of weeks. We're seeing some grim things in the national picture. Leaders being integrated into the incoming presidential administration, climate deniers heading the EPA transition. I can't even, there's, Exxon getting the Secretary of State position. I mean, too many things to name. But at the same time, we're seeing some incredible things happening in the country, and it's from on the fossil fuel opposition to the pro-clean energy side. So we see the resistance bubbling up around, continuing, around Standing Rock and the Dakota Access Pipeline. But we also see things just like the price of clean energy falling daily, the first offshore wind turbines in the United States coming online this week, Block Island. Maybe we can actually circulate that video later, but it's a really remarkable thing to seeing the first turbines off the Atlantic coast start to spin. So the national picture is bleak, but we have changed. First of all, the growth of clean energy is inevitable, and we do see abilities to build movements and to build local clean energy initiatives at the local level. So part of this is just an appeal to take heart. You can still make change. When you can't do things at the biggest level or at the national level or at the global level, we build down, and we want to give you tools and a network. Next slide, please. So I think this is one of the things I think about when I think about inspiration or need it, right? This is out in western Massachusetts, in Pioneer Valley, and Holyoke specifically. And I just remember for years hearing that we couldn't get off of coal-fired power, that it was an essential part of our grid, that we wouldn't have the power, that the plants weren't going to shut down, that people just had to breathe in the pollution. But we saw a resident-led campaign to really shut down this coal-fired power plant in Holyoke, the Mount Tom plant. And not only that, but we now have seen just recently a transition where solar is going up in the same place. And if that's not, beautiful depiction of what we can do and what we need to be doing, then I think that's probably the best single image. And in other parts of the state, we see similar, this old fossil fuel infrastructure leaving, and things like offshore wind starting to take over the energy, the power generation, and the economic development, particularly in the southeastern part of the state. So you don't have to live near a power plant to start transitioning to something cool, but I do want to just give this little point of inspiration for those of you who might have been feeling hopeless in the recent couple of weeks and are looking for that, really anything is possible. If you can go from a coal plant to a solar field, I think we can do just about anything. So given that, we do have some challenges. And could you proceed to the next slide, please? So I just still want to start out a little bit at the big picture, and part of it is just thinking about where our power comes from right now. And although we're transitioning away from the dirtiest fossil fuels, we in New England and in Massachusetts are so incredibly dependent right now on gas-fired power plants. And it's really going to take all of us pitching in to make sure that we take that big blue bar here down and scale up the smaller renewables bar that's on the bottom, rather than having, as the coal and nuclear plants go offline, we just building out more gas power plants and pipelines. And that is the big things that happen at the state level, but it's also the local things that happen in your communities, the weatherization of your municipal buildings, the solar panels on your schools, the electric buses you use, and everything else. Next slide, please. And this is just, to make the same point, right? We need to be transitioning our electric sector as well as the heat. And I think that's probably enough for there. So next slide, please. I think part of what we need to understand is the consequences of our current energy system. And it's not just that, many people who are on this, I assume, care about climate change. And MCAN, Mass Climate Action Network, has done a great job of thinking about that at a local, connecting the local to the global. But we have consequences beyond the severe impact of climate change, and ones that people who don't respond to climate change can relate to. So this slide, this is a couple years old, but one thing to think about is just that when we are relying on fossil fuels, we're sending billions of dollars out of our state. We spend so much on energy, and most of it leaves. And so we're shifting away from coal, so we might not be sending as much to Columbia or to West Virginia, but we're going to be sending that to places like the Marcellus Shale, Pennsylvania area. And the problem is the same. We have billions of dollars flowing out of our economy, and at the same time we're burning up fuels that are heating up the planet and causing air pollution. So imagine if we can relocalize that economic activity into our communities, what the difference would be, and it's kind of phenomenal. Next slide, please. Something else I like to just bring up a little bit is under our current energy system, how much control do we really have? And it's not just whether you own your utility company or not, which I think is maybe should be a more important part of the discussion, a more elevated part of the discussion. But we're basically reliant on distribution companies right now, utility companies that are multi-state and in some cases multinational. And we're subject to economic forces that are so out of our control. And I put in this slide because, when Brexit was happening, I started to hear sort of National Grid's tune change just about what they could or couldn't do economically. And to think that, our energy choices or the workforce choices of a utility company in the United States or in Massachusetts or in your community would be dictated by sort of global political things that are literally across the sea from us is kind of remarkable. And, if we're going to solve these problems, we have to be headed in a way where we both make progress on local issues, but assert more control by, and if it's not direct control, then it better be ways of, modeling how we can do clean energy locally, how we save money locally, how we can enhance public institutions rather than relying on private ones that are so removed from our control. So that's just a quick point there. Next slide, please. I think another thing here is, when things get bad, what happens? When we have extreme weather, when things are bad, we see incredible impacts on local communities from climate change and from the impacts of extreme weather. And as we start to build out more local energy initiatives, we can also at the same time be building out community resiliency. And we see in some communities in Massachusetts right now projects like energy storage, like microgrids, backup power. We have to really be starting to prepare for some of these extreme events. And these are, the ones that are pictured in this. I don't mean to scare anybody, but we have, examples of things that have already happened in Massachusetts that probably could have been avoided if we might not have avoided the storms, but we could have prepped our communities better for them. So while, the small things we can do, solar panels on schools, small efforts, it might not seem like that big a deal. In fact, it's really part of how we're going to weather the big storm here. So with that, hopefully we can dive into, in just a moment, talking about some things that you can do locally. And just a quick note, for those of you who like to really focus on greenhouse gas emissions, we have to make local change here in Massachusetts, and we have to go faster to meet not just the global challenge, but our statewide part of that. We are not on track right now, and anything we can do in any of the municipalities of the state really does help us get there. And we're building, as I said at the beginning, we're building momentum in individual communities so that when we go to the state legislature, when we go to the governor, we can say this is clearly the direction that Massachusetts wants to go. We want to combat climate change. We want to meet our legally mandated goals, and we're leading here. And since we led in these hundreds of communities, we're expecting that at the state level you're going to lead too. So thanks for that, and I think that concludes my initial slides here. I believe I'm passing it off to Ben from Environment Massachusetts at this point.
Great. Thanks so much, Joel. So as Joel was just saying, the need for us to transition away from dirty energy is clear. Whether we're talking about protecting our communities from dangerous storms or safeguarding public health, or just making sure that more of the billions of dollars that we spend on energy each year stays in our local communities and in our state. And the good news is that a future powered by 100% clean, renewable energy is within reach for Massachusetts. I think even just a few years ago, people often thought of 100% renewables as kind of this distant pipe dream of, maybe 100 years from now we'll get there. And actually, more and more the evidence is showing us that actually 100% renewables is within reach for our state. We have more than enough clean energy resources to meet all of our needs from clean energy. So we could get twice as much electricity as the entire state uses each year from solar power. And with offshore wind, it's even more. We could power the state 11 times over just with offshore wind. There are a few different folks that have looked at the question of how do we get to 100% renewables, and really, there's a lot of pieces to it. And it can get kind of complicated, but actually there's three major steps on the road to 100%. The first is that we need to dramatically increase the energy efficiency of everything in our lives. So our homes, our businesses, our lights, our cars, our transportation system, our heating, we need to make it much more efficient. The American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy estimates we can actually reduce our energy usage by 40 to 60% economy-wide in the next few decades just through energy efficiency. The second piece is we need to dramatically increase the amount of clean, renewable energy on the grid, so expanding solar and wind power and other renewable sources. And then the third piece is that for other parts of the economy that are powered by fossil fuels, so for example, our cars, our transportation infrastructure, and the heat that we have in our homes and our businesses, we need to power that with clean electricity from the grid. So basically, if we do the three steps, increase efficiency, really rapidly accelerate clean electricity on the grid, and power our transportation and heating system with clean electricity, 100% renewables is within reach. This slide shows one scenario that's been sketched out by Mark Jacobson, a professor at Stanford University who's founded something called the Solutions Project. If folks haven't seen it yet, I definitely would encourage you to look up the Solutions Project online. They have a lot of really great resources there. So this is kind of one idea for how we could get to 100% renewable energy, but there's certainly other scenarios. And as I said, the resources are far greater than anything that we could ever possibly need in our state. And then, studies from major institutions like the University of Delaware, the University of Colorado, National Renewable Energy Laboratory, the U.S. Earth System Research Laboratory have all shown that 100% renewables is within reach. So, and then we can go on to the next slide. I think actually my screen just turned dark. I don't know if other folks are able to see.
Yeah, I just got a thing saying your session was terminated unexpectedly. Hang on just a second, everybody. Let me see if I can get this back up and running. This is very strange. I apologize.
Yeah. Carol, do you want me to try to close the window and log back in? Or?
No, it's not you. It's me.
Oh.
Let's see. I wonder if I start a meeting if it will put everybody back in, or I probably shouldn't do it this way. This is very odd. I've never had this happen before. Sorry, everybody. Okay, it looks like we are back up. Control was given away while I disappeared. Let me get it back here. Okay, can folks see the screen? Joel, are you able to see the screen?
Not yet. Said waiting for presenter to share.
Okay. Sorry for the technical glitch, everyone. Okay. All right. It should be back up. Hopefully we will not have this problem again. I do apologize. Let's go ahead and move forward and keep our fingers crossed.
Cool. Yes, I think we were ready to move to the next slide.
There you go.
Great. Yeah, so these are just some examples of clean energy success stories, both here in Massachusetts and across the country. And then I think the important thing to emphasize is that our vision is for 100% clean, renewable energy that is just and equitable, and that as much as possible is local, right? So we want to make sure that the sources of energy we're investing in are actually in our local communities, and wherever possible are owned and controlled by communities and by local people, so that we can really realize the benefits locally. There's been some talk in the last few months of a few communities in Massachusetts that have gone 100% renewables in some form or another, and the way that many of them have done it is actually by buying credits from wind energy that's produced in Texas, for example. And really what we want to encourage folks to do is to focus on the sources of renewable power that are in our region and delivering benefits to our region. Even if it means a little bit less renewable energy right off the bat, it actually makes a much bigger difference in terms of actually getting more renewables on the grid. So I think that that's just kind of an important point to emphasize there. So can we go on to the next slide? So it's easier than you think to get to 100% renewables, although I don't want to say it's easy because it's going to be pretty hard in a lot of ways, but it's definitely doable. And we've seen in the last few years that renewables have grown really rapidly in Massachusetts. So this is just a graph of renewable energy growth up until 2012. And then you'll see that little sort of maroon sliver in the middle of the 2012 column is the solar power, which at the time was quite small. And then if we go to the next slide, you'll see that solar has grown even more rapidly since then. So this is actually a little bit out of date. We're actually now above 1,000 megawatts of solar. So it's increased something like fourfold just in the last 4 or 5 years. So it's really pretty incredible. And again, that's just a small fraction of what we could actually do in our state. Next slide. And then, as Joel was saying earlier, under our current energy system that's powered by fossil fuels, most of the benefits are flowing out of our state. But the good news is that even with clean energy still being a relatively small portion of our total, it is bringing huge benefits to our state. Nearly 100,000 jobs, more than 6,000 companies that are employing workers. So just really tremendous benefits. And you can imagine what would happen if we got even closer to 100%. Next slide. And then local communities are already starting to do really incredible work around clean energy. This is a photo from an event in Newton, Massachusetts, where they announced this really cool new initiative to deliver the benefits of solar power to low-income residents in the community. And there's just tons of examples of projects like this all across the state. Actually, we released a report this summer from the Environment Massachusetts Research and Policy Center, Renewable Communities, which looks at cities and towns that are really leading the way on clean energy. So happy to share that with folks if folks are interested in reading more. Going to the next one. All right. And then the key thing is that we really need action at every level in order to get to 100% renewables and get to the kind of clean energy transition that we need to see. This can start on the individual level. So there's things that we can do in our own homes to increase renewable energy. We can do it on the community level, which is mostly what we're talking about on this webinar today. And then ultimately, we need to make change happen in the legislature. And so the more that we can build support in our communities, the easier it's going to become to achieve that change on the state level. Next slide. So these local campaigns are really exciting. I mean, I think that this is just a tremendous opportunity for us to make a tangible difference in our communities and in cities and towns across the state of Massachusetts, and also send a really clear message to our state leaders that we want them and need them to be more ambitious in terms of the clean energy policies that they are pursuing. So our goal is that together with all of you that are on the call today and other folks that are working on this effort across the state, we want to get 50 towns and cities to take action on this campaign by the end of 2017. So that's basically 1 in every 7 communities across Massachusetts. And what does it look like? What does it actually look like for these communities to take action? What are we asking them to do? Well, the first thing is that we want each of these cities and towns to pass a resolution committing to a goal of 100% renewable energy for all. This is really critical because it will both set the community on a clear trajectory and say, this is something that we as a city or town are agreeing that we're going to achieve. We're going to do everything in our power to get to 100% renewables. And then it sends a really clear message to state leaders as well, that local communities are leading the way on this issue, and it's time for them to be more ambitious and forward-thinking. So first thing is we want the communities to pass a resolution committing to 100% renewable energy for all in their community. And then equally important, we want them to adopt specific local policies and local programs that are going to help to bring the community closer to 100% renewables, right? So we don't just want the commitment, we want to actually see concrete action that's going to bring us closer to where we need to be. And in just a minute, Carol's going to talk more about what are some of the specific things that communities can do to help achieve that goal. And then the third piece is to work with stakeholders and leaders in the community to build support for statewide energy reforms. So there's quite a lot that communities can do on the local level, but we know that ultimately we are going to need state action in order to really see the kind of change that we need to see happen. And so I think a big piece of this is going to be, once we get our local officials to take action in the local community, getting them to be equally outspoken on state policy issues as well, I think is really helpful. So and then the idea is that we want to get these 50 towns and cities to take action, commit to 100% renewables, and adopt these local policies and programs that are going to bring them closer to 100%. And then this is going to help us to create the change that we need to see on the state level, and ultimately, I think even in this Trump era, when so many of our environmental protections on the national level are under attack, we can continue to lead the way forward here in Massachusetts and set the course towards a 100% renewable energy future. So so with that, I will hand it over to Carol.
Thanks, Ben. So and I will say too that I think actually I know it's very frustrating to read the news or listen to the radio or watch the TV and hear what's happening at the national level. But I think one of the reason that we wanted to really work hard on this campaign and give you guys these tools is that local action proves that these solutions work. So these tools that we're going to be giving you allow you to implement solutions in your community, and they prove that these solutions work locally, and then we can prove statewide. And then when the time comes and things are able to move forward at the nationwide level, we will be ready and we will have proven solutions at our fingertips that we can say, this is what we did and this is how it helped us save money and go green and work with our communities. So basically what we've got here for you, or what we've got ready for you, we've got a bunch of resources. So tonight we're going to talk through the local clean energy assessment, which is basically a checklist. And that's something that you can sit down and do with somebody in your town. And then we're going to have fact sheets for each of the policy recommendations, and that's going to have links to useful websites or other resources. Some of them have some success stories with them. And I know that somebody asked a question about getting legal language for town meeting. A bunch of those actually have the legal language built in. We've also got sample resolutions. So Ben was talking about the 100% resolution. We've got some samples for you with that. We're going to do webinars so that we can walk everybody through, walk each of your teams through all the steps to get things done and connect you to all the resources. And then we'll also have sample campaign materials. So stuff like a petition that you can do in your town, sign-on letters, letters to the editor, opinion editorials, all of that kind of thing that you can use to educate folks in your town. So basically what you want to start out by doing, and I'm betting that most of you on the phone have already done a lot of these steps, but the first thing is to build your team. So, trying to do something, trying to pass a new policy or put up a new clean energy project in your town by yourself is incredibly difficult. So having a team makes it more pleasant, it makes it more effective, it makes it more streamlined. I know a bunch of you are joining us from anti-pipeline sites. That might be a first place to start with your team. There might be folks from your Conservation Commission or your Energy Committee or whatever body already exists in town. You probably know 2 to 4 other people who you could ask to be a part of your team. And once you've thought about who those people are, you should go ahead and hold a first meeting. And one of the things that we always try to do and don't always succeed at is making it fun. So having some food is a big plus. Another thing is that making it as inclusive as possible. So one of the reasons that we did this at 8 p.m. tonight was so that people with small kids could put them to bed before they joined the webinar. So, just thinking about stuff like that, where you have it, when you have it, trying to invite as broad a slice of your community as you possibly can. And then at your meeting, you want to think about what you'd like to accomplish together and how you want to win. I would very much encourage folks to think about long-term engagement, obviously without burning yourself out and without scaring people right at the very beginning. But, if you don't have an energy committee, maybe thinking about whether you guys could form one in the long run, that would be good. So then the next step is starting to talk to your elected officials and your town staff to go over the checklist. So the checklist, which we'll show you some images of in just a second, and we will send you the link to, basically it's a tool so that you can sit down with somebody in your town and figure out what you've done, figure out where your town sort of falls in the spectrum of communities, think about what's possible, and then it also helps you target your education. So the checklist is 3 pages long. We tried to make it into 2 pages, and it just wouldn't fit. And basically, what we've done is that we break it down into a bunch of different categories, which I'll go through in just a minute, and then you count up the number of check marks that you have. So if you've got like between 1 and 7 check marks in there, you're probably a beginner town, and you need to do some education and start with some things that are likely to be popular. If you've got more check marks, you might fall into the intermediate category, which means that you've already done a bunch of stuff, but there's still plenty left to do. And you might want to think about doing something a little bit more difficult. But then if you're an advanced town, and I see somebody's asking, will we get a copy of the checklist to you? Yes, we definitely will. And if you're an advanced town, what we're asking you to do, and there are a bunch of them in Massachusetts, what we're asking you to do is really stretch and do some hard stuff. So basically the checklist categories are things like energy efficiency. So that's everything from your municipal buildings to whether there's been any energy efficiency programs run in your town. Then there's things like town workings in terms of who you have on staff, whether you've become a green community, have you done a greenhouse gas inventory or a climate action plan. We ask you about clean energy. So do you have solar in your schools? Are you part of a community choice aggregation program that buys clean energy? What have you guys done on transportation? Do you have bike lanes? Do you have electric buses? How walkable is your town? We have sort of an other category, which is things like trash and recycling and compost, and there's a lot of stuff in there. And then there's climate adaptation, so sea level rise, storm sewers. Does your town have an adaptation plan? So basically, when we send you the checklist, what we'd like you to do is sit down with somebody from your town government. And like I said, it could be somebody from your Board of Selectmen or your City Council. It could be a town staffer. For instance, if you've got, it could be your town manager. It could be an energy manager. You want to go through all the categories and check everything that's actually done or is most of the way through, and then score your town. And again, that sort of falls into beginning, intermediate, and advanced, and we in no way mean any of these categories pejoratively. It's all good. We're excited that you guys are planning on doing anything. So then we want you to send us the information, because what we're going to do is we're going to schedule webinars for you guys based on who gets us the information back and where they are. So if we get 10 communities or 20 communities that say we're a beginner town and we want to do something, then probably the first thing we'll do is schedule the webinar about the beginner policy recommendations. And then, work with your team, pick a project, and go forth and conquer. So I just want to stress this. I know I mentioned this, but I just want to stress the fact that the checklist, part of the purpose of it is to help you think about where you are and therefore how much education folks in town are going to need just to buy in to these projects and policies. So basically, I'm going to just walk you guys through the set of policy recommendations, policy and project recommendations that we've got, and we kind of broke them out into short-term, medium-term, and long-term. And basically, so if you're a beginner town, you probably don't have a greenhouse gas inventory or a climate action plan. So what we've done is that we've built a couple of two-pagers for you that talk about why you'd want it and how to do it. Same thing with the energy efficiency audit for your municipal buildings. And obviously, once you've done the audit, you should do the energy efficiency upgrades. Becoming a green community takes a little bit longer, but it also gives you access to grant money, which is a big positive. So those are our beginner town recommendations. And again, we're going to have two-pagers for each of these things for you guys, as well as contacts of folks that you can connect with. So if you're an intermediate town, you might think about green municipal aggregation, which we'll go into a whole thing on the webinar of what community choice aggregation or green municipal aggregation is, but it's basically bulk purchasing for clean energy for everybody in town. You might want to think about passing a solar-ready bylaw in town meeting or through your city council. You might want to do a solarized program in your town or make a commitment, to double the amount of clean energy that you've got on your municipal buildings and your properties. So just in terms of aggregation, I'm actually going to let, I'll do this one. Aggregation, again, is the idea that there's every household in town who's on basic service, the town becomes their default supplier instead of the utility. You still get your bill through the utility, but you're able to, as a town, choose how much additional clean energy you want. So the two towns that we highlight here are getting 5% additional clean energy. So that takes them up to, at this point, 16% Class 1 renewable energy from the New England region, which is fantastic. And you can see it's Dedham and Melrose. And I also want to give a shout out. I know that there's somebody from Brookline, at least one person from Brookline on the line. Brookline is doing aggregation, and they're going for 25% additional, so for a total of 36% clean energy starting in January. So, and again, all of these things, we will have fact sheets for you to tell you how to go about doing this. So if you are an advanced town, so a town like Cambridge would fall into this category, for instance. They've done an awful lot. How do we help them do a little bit more? So one of the things that's really tough is getting energy efficiency to renters and low to moderate income households. So we would encourage advanced towns to think about a way to do that. If you don't already have one, putting together a net zero plan. So that's basically achieving zero emissions for buildings and transportation throughout your whole town. And then for communities that have existing climate action plans, which a lot of the advanced towns would, incorporating environmental justice and equity principles into your plan, revisiting your plan, and thinking about how you can be more inclusive of your entire community. So those are the advanced town policy recommendations. And I'm going to turn it over to Joel for the examples of net zero planning. We've got a couple towns here.
Thanks, Carol. And I will be quick on this slide, but I wanted to just spotlight two very different interventions by two quite different communities in Eastern and Western Mass. So the first one is just Cambridge, which has really been an innovator in clean energy for a long time. But one of the ideas going forward between for reducing local carbon emissions is starting with new buildings and new construction, really zeroing out emissions building by building, setting construction standards, adding local renewable generation, and developing a municipal plan for that. So that was an initiative that activists in Cambridge and progressive municipal officials took on. And one kind of effort that as an advanced community you could possibly take on. And my hope actually is we might pull in some of the people who are involved in that effort, who are continuing, as in their role as climate activists and some progressive city and state officials, to bring that out to other communities. So again, planning, setting really tough standards for buildings to basically eliminate their net impact, such that they produce a lot of energy on site. They're buying green energy from elsewhere. They have very efficient buildings and high, strong engineering standards. And another example, and this is again, it's quite a different one, but this is really about more on environmental justice and equity. And as you plan carbon emission reductions, how do you do that in a way that both reaches everyone, but also resonates with communities that might not, or individuals who might not respond immediately to the idea of just greenhouse gases? That's not what drives them. So in this regard, we've spotlighted a group from Western Mass, the Springfield Climate Justice Coalition, and I know that there are some folks from the Pioneer Valley on today. Basically, a large group or a number of organizations in greater Springfield area had been pushing the city to start the climate action process for a long time. And I think that for a while it seemed like nothing was moving. But they kept beating the drums. They got more and more people involved, had community groups, anti-poverty groups, environmental groups, faith organizations, and probably other folks that I'm missing, do multiple rallies and community meetings around this. And in addition to talking about the big issues, talked about very specific things. We have a lot of air pollution in our community. We'd like to reduce leaks from the local gas distribution lines. We want, less trash. We don't want this biomass facility. Many, a whole range of specific things. So they set themselves up that when the city saw a grant opportunity from the federal government, it turned out that there was an opportunity for funding, but it was really the opportunity was there, particularly to communities that had an environmental bent. So this coalition had campaigned, and then suddenly they found themselves in a place where the municipal government, in order to get more funding, really wanted their kind of support or endorsement or an environmental stamp on this. And so now this climate action planning process is in fact going forward. So there's great groups, Arise for Social Justice, I think Climate Action Now, the Pioneer Valley Project, and others have done a remarkable job, and I think are seeing the fruits of it now. And again, the whole frame about this is really like how do we make sure everyone benefits, right, globally, but also locally in a community where transit is incredibly important, where a lot of people do face health disparities. So it'd be really interesting, right, if we can get folks, whether they've done a climate action plan or not, in all parts of the state to start thinking in that way and see what the results are and what kind of environmental movement we can build. And I'll pass it back now.
Okay, thanks, Joel. So just to quickly tell you guys about the timeline that we're hoping for. So basically starting now, we want you guys to take the clean energy checklist and sit down with your local officials in your community. Obviously also, building your team if you don't already have one. Getting the information back to us. In January, we'd like to do some coordinated campaign launch events. So when we started Mass Power Forward, we did a series of press conferences around the state. It was incredibly successful. We did them all on the same day, and it worked out really great. So we'd like to do that with some campaign launch events for this. February through April is sort of that town meeting season. So, you usually have to get language in February. We can work with you guys on this. Obviously, we'll keep doing local launches as more communities come in. In the fall, we've got town meeting season again. And then, as Ben said earlier, by December of 2017, we want to have 50 towns and cities that are committed to 100% renewables for all and who have taken concrete steps to get closer to that goal. So Joel's going to just quickly go through. I know some of you are in towns with the municipal light plants, and we have not forgotten about you. So Joel, if you just want to touch on that.
Yeah, thanks, Carol. So for folks who don't know, a muni or municipal light plant, or MLP, whatever you want to call it, is basically a publicly owned, locally owned utility company. So as opposed to National Grid or Eversource, it means it's locally controlled. These there are pros and cons. One is that it is, or I would say a pro would be that it's a more democratic structure. A con would be that it's not subject to the same regulation by the state. So some of the requirements around clean energy and energy efficiency aren't placed on municipal light plants. There are, dozens of these, I think over 50 in the state. So it's very important that we do, whether through state requirements or local action, get them on board. And if you go muni by muni, they're really in all kinds of different places as far as how green they are. The Metropolitan Area Planning Council, we will, depending on the interest from people who have attended and future inquiries, likely develop resources that are specific to MLPs or muni light plants. But I do want to highlight something, which is the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, or MEPC report. The link is on your screen, and it spotlights really great clean energy initiatives at municipally owned light plants. And I just wanted to point out that it's really communities that are as different as Holyoke and Wellesley, which are, again, eastern and western part of, or Metro West and Western Mass, right? So roughly eastern and western parts of the state. Very different income communities, very different size, but both doing really awesome things. Just a reminder, too, that because these kinds of plants are publicly governed, some of them are elected, some of them are appointed, so such as like the board members might be appointed by the select board of the town. There is at least a direct or one-step removed democracy way of influencing that. So we might think about, if your muni is just stubborn and unwilling to move on clean energy, think about how you influence that through either pressure on a select board or on the election of the muni board itself. Those are just a quick preview, but I do encourage you, if you're in a municipal light plant town, to check out the MEPC resource.
So we are to the question and answer section. we may go just a few minutes after 9 o'clock. We had intended to really keep this to 9 o'clock, but our slideshow was so chock full of information that we went a little bit long. So there have been a bunch of questions that I've been gathering as we've been going through. So I'll just, maybe what I'll do is I'll answer a couple of them and then I'll hand a couple of them off to Ben or Joel. So first of all, Curtis asked about whether there were local fights to boost, and I think maybe Joel might have responded to you in the chat, but what we're hoping is that you guys will get these local fights going. There may, in some cases, I know that some folks mentioned that there was community choice aggregation, possibly getting started in their town. There may be local fights that are already starting, in which case we're happy to help you boost those. I would say get in touch with Joel or Ben or myself. If you're an MCAN person, get in touch with me. That's Carol. I'm the last email address at the bottom there. And then also somebody made a really good point, which is that we need to make sure that we're working in coalition. And I think that's part of that idea of building your team in an inclusive way. Let's not duplicate efforts. Let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's all work together and get things done and be strong. So think about who might be in some of the other groups in your town that you might be able to work with. So those are, that's an answer and a point, I guess. And Joel or Ben, does one of you want to answer why local energy is important?
Sure. I think, and we'll try to send this out or something similar about it out. Part of the question has to do, so where energy is purchased from, why does that matter? Part of it is that we're trying to drive our energy transition forward. So to be sure that we're not just buying a credit that for energy that already exists, but that the purchasing we make and the policies we put into place actually drive new renewable energy. And Mass Energy Consumers Mass Energy Consumers Alliance is a great resource on this. But basically, in New England, we'll often talk about Class 1 RECs or renewable energy credits, and that's really what we're talking about there is energy credits that are for new generation. So if we want to get off of fossil fuels and we want to show that actually we are concretely moving forward, these kind of certificates and the guarantee that we're purchasing new renewable energy are really the way to do it. And we can do a deeper dive on that at a later time. But that's a lot of what we're talking about. I mean, if we're trying to avoid building new fossil fuel facilities in our region, then we have to be building new clean energy in our region.
Thanks, Joel. So a question that I think, Ben, would be good for you to answer is, Tom asked, are we looking at 100% just for the public sector or 100% of all energy use?
Yeah, that's a good question. When we say 100% renewables, we mean 100% of all energy use. So whether that's energy that's consumed by homes or businesses or industry or government buildings or whatever, we want to see all of that come from clean and renewable sources. And then often the public sector can be, in many ways, the easiest place for local communities to start because it is the thing that they have the most direct control over in many cases. So things like improving the energy efficiency of municipal buildings or installing solar panels on the high school or whatever the case might be. But there's actually a lot that local communities can do to encourage their residents to install more clean energy and energy efficiency upgrades. So things like doing outreach in the community to connect people with energy audits for their homes, or creating a Solarize Massachusetts program where basically they're helping to make solar installations more accessible and affordable to people in the community. So those are all things that the town government can do to increase clean energy adoption in their community. And then we'd recognize that probably no city can get to 100% renewables on their own, but at least they can take major steps in that direction and then set a clear indication for the way that state officials should go as well.
Yeah, and Dan made the point that the municipal portion of the town energy use is only about 4% out of the 100% all told. And Dan, that's why we want you guys to go for the 100% for everybody in town for all the energy use. Somebody also asked, do we have enough renewable energy online to go to 100% for everybody in Massachusetts yet? And the answer is no, we don't. We do have we have enough, wind off our shores, as Ben mentioned. the issue with that is that the more demand there is for it, the more those projects are going to be built. So this local energy projects and local energy policies work is also aimed at building up that demand so that we really are changing from fossil fuels to clean energy. And Kathy, actually, Ben, this might be one for you. Kathy asks, is the time frame for 100% open-ended? She said she's heard about 2030.
Yeah, what we've been saying is no later than 2050, but I think we want to be a little bit cautious with that number just because I think if you say something's going to happen in 2050, it kind of lets people off the hook for the short term, right? So what I always say is that, we want to definitely get to 100% by 2050, and we think we can make major progress in that direction in the next decade or two. And actually, we would want to see 100% renewables in the electricity sector probably sooner than that, so, in the 2030 to 2040 time range. And that way we have time to convert over some of the things that are going to be harder, for example, the transportation sector and heating.
Thanks, Ben. So I just want to throw out there, Kurt said something about community choice aggregation in the plan, and that's sort of in the works for your town, and I'm happy to do what I can to help you with that. We've been doing community choice aggregation with several towns. This is Carol from MCAN. You can see my email is at the bottom of the screen, so please email me and we can connect and make sure that I can help you in any way possible with what's happening in your town. So Jan asks, there are major plans per Baker's Executive Order 569 for a combination of mitigation and resiliency. Have we coordinated with DOER? Isn't there a possibility in municipalities of environmental exhaustion? Joel, do you want to take that one?
Sure. So the executive order that's being referenced is one the governor put out recently on climate adaptation. I think largely that's going to be targeting, at least first, really, state agencies. So first of all, I don't think that there's going to be I don't think people are going to be overwhelmed if we're asking municipalities to do new initiatives. I think, sure, there's as far as activist time pushing state and local governments to do more, that's one question. But I think largely, we want our state government to be moving along with these initiatives, and at the same time, for local governments to be moving along as well, and separately. I guess maybe one question as part of that, if I'm just reading the chat thread correctly, is like, how does it include municipal light plants? I think there's been a discussion of whether there should be a state clean energy standard, which is something that was proposed in the Patrick administration and never quite implemented. And that may or may not end up applying, if it happens at all, to municipal light plants. So it's a good thing to follow, but I think that regardless, you're going to want municipal light plants to move of their own accord, whether or not the state is requiring them to do so. And one of the interesting things about munis is that, and I forgot to mention this, they can own their own generation in ways that the larger multi-state, multinational utilities can't. So in any case, much more to just talk about there, but I'll pass it back to Carol.
Thanks. So I just want to say, and Kenneth just left the meeting, but Kenneth Weiss said, in my town, resolutions need a 2/3 vote, but bylaw changes only need 50%. So I would say, by all means, do the bylaw changes if your town is like that, because the resolutions are great to signal the intent for the town, and the bylaws actually have teeth, so that's fantastic. So I am actually going to, I think we've answered a ton of folks' questions. So I'm going to go ahead, and we are at 9 o'clock. I'm going to go ahead and finish this up. I want to thank everybody for joining us. I hope you've written down our email address, and I hope you learned a lot. We're going to send everybody the checklist and folks can get started hopefully really soon on Talking to Your Town. So thanks again for joining, and thank you to Ben and Joel for your expertise and your co-presenting.
Yeah, thanks so much, everybody.